everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Bobby Valentine Sports Show. I'm your host, Frank Rampin. Week 14 in the books. There are only 4 weeks remaining until the end of the NFL regular season, then the playoffs are here. Just 1 calendar month to go. Crazy that we've already gotten this far, almost to Christmas. Crazy how fast the NFL season goes through. So, start things off like we always do with the stat of the week. Pretty interesting one for this week. The NFC has been historically good this year. The first conference to have 3 11-win teams through Week 14 since the NFC back in 1986. 40 years ago almost. First conference of 3 11-win teams through Week 14 since 1986. Unbelievable. So, pick things up. Standings update for this week, starting in the AFC East, like always. The Buffalo Bills, they lost a shootout this weekend to fall to 10-3, losing to the Rams in SoFi Stadium 44-42. It was the highest scoring game of the season this year, and Josh Allen had a day. This was the second game in NFL history where there were 5 or more passing touchdowns, 5 or more rushing touchdowns, and 0 combined turnovers. The only other game was the 1965 game between the Chiefs and the Broncos. Josh Allen went 23 for 37, 342 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Josh Allen became the first player in NFL regular season history to have 3 passing and 3 rushing touchdowns in the same game. The only other player to have 3 passing and 3 rushing in the same game was Otto Graham in the 1954 NFL Championship game versus the Detroit Lions. Graham, they won the game 56-10. Josh Allen, when he did this, they lost 44-12. So a brutal day for Josh Allen after putting up the greatest fantasy performance in the history of football by a quarterback. 51.88 fantasy points, the most by a quarterback since at least 1950 when they started tracking that. Unbelievable. Josh Allen's combined 32 passing and rushing touchdowns this year are tied for the most in the NFL with Lamar Jackson. And entering Sunday, teams to score 6 touchdowns and have 0 giveaways were 245-0 in the Super Bowl era, including the playoffs. The Bills on Sunday were the first team to do this and lose the game. Unbelievable. The Miami Dolphins, they've improved to 6-7 after beating the New York Jets 32-26 in overtime. Tua had his 3rd straight game passing over 300 yards, tied for the longest streak in Miami history, which I would assume would be with Dan Marino. Johnny Smith had no catches in this game until overtime. He made 3 massive catches in the overtime period, including the game-winning touchdown. Clutch plays from him. He's been very good down the stretch for this Dolphins team. The Jets, just talked about them. They lose heartbreaker in overtime, another heartbreaker for this Jets team. Longest active playoff drought in North American professional sports. The longest active drought, the New York Jets. 14 seasons, including this one. Their last playoff appearance was 2010, followed by the Buffalo Sabres. They were in a 13-season drought. Their last appearance was 2010-11. The Angels have not been to the playoffs in 10 years. Last time was 2014. And the Pirates, 9 years. Last time was 2015. The New England Patriots, they are 3-10. They had their bye week this week. And over to the NFCs, the Philadelphia Eagles, they improved to 11-2. Had a tough game, though, against the Carolina Panthers. They did end up winning 22-16. They were losing in the 4th quarter. But the Eagles pick up their 9th consecutive win. That's tied for the longest streak in franchise history. Saquon Barkley, already up over 1,600 rushing yards, 1,623 this season. That already breaks the single-season rushing record in Eagles history. That was set by LaShawn McCoy back in 2013 with 1,560. He's on pace for 2,122 yards, which would be the NFL record. This was Saquon's 9th game this season with 100 or more rushing yards, the most in a single season in Eagles history. But the passing game has been a little bit of a problem. So the drama after the game between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. Brandon Graham came out and said on a podcast that they're not really friends anymore. They're beefing. Interesting stuff going on behind the scenes in Philly. Not ideal. Jalen Hurts went 14 for 21, only 108 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, did have 59 rushing yards, and a touchdown. Under 200 passing yards for the 3rd consecutive game, and it was his 4th career start with fewer than 110 passing yards. So, looking to figure things out. They got their rushing attack going. Last year, that was more of a problem. This year, they have the best running back maybe in the history of the NFL, best running back season in the history of the NFL. The line's blocking, but they can't really pass the ball. They have 2 games this season with fewer than 100 passing yards. That's the first time they've done that since 2005. They've only attempted 328 passes this year. That is the fewest in the NFL. The Eagles are averaging 190 rushing yards per game. That's first in the NFL. but only 180 passing yards per game, which is 31st in the NFL. So averaging more yards rushing than passing, that doesn't happen in today's NFL, and it's pretty crazy to even see that number on the stat sheet. Wild. Commanders had a bye. They're still 8-5. The Dallas Cowboys saw them play last night on Monday Night Football. They lose to Cincinnati 27-20. They are 1-6 at home this year and 4-2 on the road. After going undefeated last year at home, they have only one win. It came against the Giants on Thanksgiving, and man, everything else has been a struggle. The Cowboys at home this season, they have 6 losses, their most since 2015. 7 straight games allowing 20 points, the longest active streak in the NFL, and they've committed 17 turnovers, the most in the NFL at home. The New York Giants, they lose a heartbreaker to the New Orleans Saints, fall to 2-11. They score a touchdown and a 2-point conversion late in this ballgame to make it 14-11. They got the ball back with a chance to tie it or win the game. They lined up for a game-tying field goal as time expired from about 35 yards away, and it got blocked. Brutal ending for the Giants. They fall to 2-11. Trey Hawkins III caught the first pick of the season for the Giants. Snaps the longest streak, 11 games without a pick in NFL history. That is since they started tracking interceptions back in 1933. Unbelievable game this was. Blocked field goal for the win. The Steelers, they improved to 10-3 after beating Cleveland 27-14. Russell Wilson avenges his one and only loss for the Pittsburgh Steelers to Jameis Winston and the Browns, sending the Browns to their 10th loss of the season. The Ravens, they're still 8-5. They had a bye this week. Hopefully Lamar able to get things back. The Bengals, they improved to 5-8, defeating Dallas 27-20 on Monday Night Football. First road win versus the Cowboys for the Bengals since 1988. 5th road win on Monday Night Football in Bengals history. They're 5-20 all time. Not so good of a record there. Joe Burrow continues to light it up. 33 of 44, 369 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. 4th straight game for Joe Burrow with 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Tied for the second longest streak in NFL history. Jamar Chase had 14 receptions for 177 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those 14 receptions ties the record on Monday Night Football. 4 straight games with a receiving touchdown. 3rd straight on Monday Night Football for Jamar. He's got 100 receiving yards in all 4 games on Monday Night Football in his career. And Jamar, the 7th player in NFL history with 2 or more receiving touchdowns in 3 straight road games. Jamar has the most yards per game in prime time since the 1970 NFL merger. Jamar has 104.8 yards per game. That is more than Megatron, who averaged 94, and AB, who averaged 91.8. And Jamar on pace for the Triple Crown right now. He's got 93 receptions, which is first, 1,319 yards, you guessed it, first, and 15 touchdowns. No one else is close. The Cleveland Browns fall to 3-10 after losing to Pittsburgh 27-14. Jameis did get delivered from his pick sixes. After Monday night last week, in his post-game press conference, he says, "Please, Lord, deliver me from pick sixes." He did that. Jameis did throw 2 picks, but none of them went to the house. So, hey, good start for Jameis, getting back into the rhythm of things. Over to the North, starting in the NFC North now. The Detroit Lions, they beat the Green Bay Packers on Thursday Night Football 34-31 to improve to 12-1. 11 wins in a row for this Lions team, the longest streak in team history. They were the first team to win 11 games in a row in a single season since the 2020 Steelers. They've clinched their playoff berth, not the division though, because the Minnesota Vikings are right on their heels. They've won 6 of their last 7 versus the Packers. Jared Goff in his career, 7-3 versus Green Bay. And Dave Montgomery, the 3rd Lions player with 12 or more rushing touchdowns in consecutive seasons. He joins the GOAT, Barry Sanders, and Billy Sims, some running back royalty there in Detroit. And Jahmyr Gibbs had 43 rushing yards, 6 receptions for 30 yards, and a touchdown. The Lions are averaging 14.2 points in the second quarter, over a touchdown scored in the second quarter all year. That would be the highest points per quarter in any quarter for a team in NFL history. And the Lions, they're 9-1 in prime time since 2022, and 4-0 this season in games decided by 3 or fewer points. The Minnesota Vikings, 11-2. They beat the Atlanta Falcons 42-21. This game was 21-21 going into the 4th quarter. Kirk threw a couple picks. The Vikings offense went crazy. Sam Darnold had a day. Best start for the Vikings since 2009. Sam Darnold has had 347 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. That's a career high in yards and in touchdowns. He's the 2nd quarterback in team history with 300 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, and no picks in a game. Jordan Addison had 133 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns, and Jay Jettas had 132 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. And Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, the first pair of Vikings teammates to each have 100 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns since 1986. And Justin Jefferson, the second fastest player in NFL history to reach 7,000 receiving yards. Lance Allworth was first, also tied with Julio Jones. Both did it in 72 games. And now Justin Jefferson did it in 73. Passing Torrey Holt, Randy Moss, and Jerry Rice, who did it respectively in 82 and 83. The Green Bay Packers, they lost to the Detroit Lions 34-31 on Thursday night. All 4 of the losses for the Packers this year have come to teams with at least 9 wins. Josh Jacobs has been a godsend for this Green Bay Packers team. We just let him go. Didn't even decide to have a conversation with him, even though he led the league in rushing a few times when he was on the Raiders. But, it's fine. Josh Jacobs, 3 rushing touchdowns. 3 rushing touchdowns for the second time in the last 3 games. He's got 8 touchdowns in his last 4 games. The third player in Packers history to have 8 touchdowns in a 4-game span, joining Jim Taylor and Aaron Jones. And Josh Jacobs, over 1,000 yards for the 4th time in his 6th-year career. Chicago Bears absolutely destroyed by the San Francisco 49ers, 38-13. And here are the first half stats. It was 24-0 San Francisco. The Niners had 254 passing yards. Caleb Williams and the Bears, -3. The total yards, the Niners, 319. The Bears, -4 total yards at halftime. First downs, 14 for the Niners, 1 for the Bears. The Bears had more first downs in the first half than they did total yards. That just shows you how things are going there. Did not get the interim head coach boost. They lost the game. AFC South now, the Texans were on a bye, the Colts were on a bye, and the 2 worst teams in the league played each other. Jacksonville Jaguars beat the Tennessee Titans 10-6 in one of the most boring games of the season, if we're going to be honest. Not very fun to watch. All I saw was Tony Pollard score a touchdown. That's really all you needed to see. Man, that game was a snooze fest. The Tampa Bay Bucks improved to 7-6 and take over the Falcons for the top spot in the NFC South, after they beat my Raiders 28-13. Raiders defense actually played a decent game, forced 2 fumbles after having none for the first 13 games of the season, or 12. 2 fumbles on back-to-back drives after having none for the whole season so far. But they still lose 28-13. The Falcons, talked about them a little bit. They lost to Minnesota 42-21. Tie ball game going into the 4th quarter. Kirk Cousins, 8 picks, no touchdowns in his last 4 games. He had another bad game. I think he threw 2 picks in this one. Tough stretch for Kirk Cousins and a tough time to do it against your former team in Minnesota. The Michael Penix talk is going to get loud this week, and man, Kirk needs to get it figured out. The Saints improved to 5-8, beat the Giants 14-11, but Derek Carr suffered a broken hand and a concussion. Late in the game, tried to dive for a first down. Really wasn't a smart play. Tried to dive over a defender and his own guy trying to block him. It was kind of crazy. Came down hard on his left hand, smacked his head on the ground. He's going to be out probably for a few weeks. The Panthers, they lose to Philly 22-16, but hey, the Panthers have looked a lot better recently. They're 3-10, but man, Bryce Young, ever since he came back from being benched, he's looked a lot better. He made a few plays in this game against the Eagles that were like, oh wow, this is the guy. Still came up a little bit short on 4th down late in the game, but man, Xavier Legette dropped a touchdown on a pretty nice pass from Bryce Young that could have been the winner. AFC West now, the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Chargers 19-17 on Sunday Night Football. Their 2nd consecutive game winning 19-17. They improved to 12-1. They've won 15 games in a row in 1-score games, the longest streak in NFL history. They just secured their 9th consecutive AFC West title, the 2nd longest streak in NFL history to win any division. 4th win this season when scoring less than 20 points, of course. And Andy Reid, he improved to 32-2 when allowing 0 points at halftime. 14th division title for Andy Reid, the 2nd most since the 1970 NFL merger. Their plus 56 point differential is the lowest by a 12-1 team in NFL history. They have 10 one-possession wins. 10 of their 12 wins have come in 1-score games. And Mahomes, 35-5 against the AFC West. 35-5 in division games, the best by any starting quarterback since those stats were tracked back in 1950. And the Chargers, another heartbreaking loss for them, a doink-made field goal. 3rd time being shut out in the first half since Justin Herbert has been on the team, and their 11th straight loss in games decided by 3 or fewer points. And the Broncos, they're still 8-5, holding on to that last wildcard spot. They had a bye. And my Raiders, they fall to 2-11. They're absolutely brutal. I had them going 9-8 this year. Think about how bad that was. They lost to Tampa Bay 28-13, but Brock Bowers is unbelievable. Sure, Jaden Daniels, sure, Bo Nix, but Brock Bowers is on pace to break all the rookie receiving records, not just for tight ends, for receivers and anyone catching passes. Brock Bowers just broke the NFL record for the most receptions by a rookie tight end in the history of the NFL. Brock Bowers got his 87th catch on Sunday to pass Sam Laporta, who had 86 last year. Keith Jackson had 81 in 1988, and Jeremy Shockey, 74 in 2002. The Raiders recovered their first fumble of the season on Sunday, the last team to recover a fumble all year. Mentioned that a little bit earlier. And to wrap things up, the NFC West, the Seattle Seahawks sitting at 8-5 after beating the Arizona Cardinals for the second time in the last 3 weeks, 30-18. Zach Charbonnet had 193 scrimmage yards and 2 total touchdowns. Pretty solid day for the Seattle Seahawks and Charbonnet. The Rams, though, played that crazy game against Buffalo, beating them 44-42 to get over 500 for the first time this season. 7-6 they are. Kyron Williams ran for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game. Cooper Kupp had 92 receiving yards and a touchdown. And Puka Nacua, 12 catches, 162 receiving yards, 178 scrimmage yards total, 2 total touchdowns. The first player in Rams history with over 160 receiving yards and a rushing touchdown in the same game. It was Puka's first career game with 2 total touchdowns, and Matthew Stafford, 23 for 30, 320 yards, 2 touchdowns. This was the first time the Rams scored 40 points with Matthew Stafford as the starting quarterback. That includes the playoffs, his 59th start. The Arizona Cardinals, they fall to 6-7, losing to Seattle for the second time in 3 weeks. Offense looked very bad in this game. Didn't really get anything. I mean, the first drive of the game, they scored a 50-yard touchdown. After that, went super stagnant until the fourth quarter. Nothing really happened until late. 30-18, they have lost a couple games in this division over the past few weeks. And to wrap things up, the San Francisco 49ers beat the Chicago Bears 38-13. They are 6-7, still in last place in the West. George Kittle, the third tight end ever to have 500 or more catches and 7,000 or more receiving yards in their first 8 seasons. He joins Antonio Gates and Travis Kelce. So, tight end royalty there for George Kittle, entering an exclusive group. He's very good, continuing to have a great career. So that's going to do it for us here on the Bobby Valentine Sports Show. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. 14 weeks down in the NFL season, only 4 to go. Playoffs will be here sooner than you know it, and we'll be at the Super Bowl. So hopefully you enjoyed this one. We'll be back next week after Week 15. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all that good stuff at the Bobby Valentine Sports Show. And any questions on the Bobby Valentine Sports Academy at bvacademy.com. So I'm Frank Rampin. Have a good one. Peace out.